The moment USA Basketball handed Caitlin Clark the number 17 jersey, it triggered far more than a wardrobe issue. This wasn't just about digits. It was about identity, legacy, and leverage. Clark, whose number 22 has become a symbol of her dominance and marketability, was told she'd have to leave it behind for international play. It's a decision that feels less like logistics and more like a calculated move.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
No similar demands were made of other players, and this comes as the WNBA stares down a possible lockout. That's not coincidence. That's pressure. For many, it's a familiar pattern, diminishing star power under the guise of protocol. This isn't just about Caitlin Clark, or even just about jersey numbers. It's about the quiet, repeated ways women in sports are told to shrink, whether through pay, exposure, or in this case, erasing a part of their public identity. While the outside world, including celebrities like Lil Wayne, elevates Clark as a cultural force, her own sports institutions appear more focused on controlling her narrative than honoring her impact. This conflict highlights the growing tension between the individual athlete's brand and the old structures unwilling to adapt to their influence. Caitlin Clark refusing to play because she didn't get jersey number 22 isn't just a dramatic headline. It's the latest, clearest example of how women's sports continue to be undermined by the very organizations that claim to support them. Let's be clear. Caitlin Clark isn't just another athlete on the roster. She's the face of a movement, the single most talked about figure in women's basketball right now. Her name alone draws attention, ticket sales, sponsorships, ratings. She shifted the way the sport is viewed. And a huge part of that identity, the number 22, that number is stitched into the fabric of her brand. It's the one she wore while dominating at Iowa. It's the number fans wore in the stands. It's what made her instantly recognizable, even to casual viewers. You see 22 and you think Caitlin Clark. So when USA Basketball decided to strip her of that number and replace it with 17, it wasn't just a switch. It was a message. And that message landed hard. Because no one else was wearing 22. That number wasn't claimed. It wasn't a situation where there was a seniority conflict or some long-retired legacy to respect. There was no practical reason to deny it, which makes the decision feel pointed, almost like it was meant to diminish her, to knock her down just as her influence was reaching a global scale. And the reaction? Instant outrage. Because people know what this means. This isn't about digits on a jersey. It's about respect, identity, and the way female athletes are continually reminded that no matter how big they get, no matter how much history they make, they're still expected to fall in line. The timing couldn't be worse. This is all happening during an era where the WNBA is already facing massive structural problems, low salaries, bad travel conditions, and looming collective bargaining fights. There's real talk of a league lockout. And while all of that brews in the background, one of the league's most important figures is being publicly disrespected by the national team. That doesn't feel accidental. The move to force Clark into number 17 isn't being seen as logistical. It's being seen as political, as a way to assert control, as a reminder that no matter how many records she breaks or headlines she makes, the system still thinks it owns her image. That even her brand, the part she built from the ground up, isn't really hers. And when you zoom out, this is exactly the kind of thing that happens to women athletes all the time. They fight for visibility, only to be dismissed. They push for fair treatment, only to be told not yet. They rise to cultural prominence, only to have their voices drowned out by the same old institutions holding onto outdated power structures. Caitlin Clark being told she can't wear number 22 feels symbolic of everything wrong with that system. Meanwhile, outside of the Federation bubble, Clark's being hailed as a generational icon. Lil Wayne? Yes, that Lil Wayne went out his way to praise her publicly, called her the GOAT, said he'd pay to watch her play. That's not a regular endorsement. That's a pop culture stamp of approval, a validation that stretches way beyond sports. And yet, USA Basketball didn't blink. They had a chance to embrace that momentum, to celebrate her rise, to make her feel like the valued, game-changing athlete she is. Instead, They reduced her to just another name on the roster sheet, assigned her number 17, and moved on, like everything she represents can be set aside. And if you think this is just an overreaction to a jersey number, you're not paying attention. Symbols matter in sports. Ask anyone who's ever cheered for a player. Ask any kid who bought a jersey because they wanted to feel like their hero. Those numbers mean something. And when you erase that without a good reason, it's not neutral, it's disrespect. Especially when it's only happening to her. Because no other player on the team was asked to give up their identity. No one else was stripped of their number with no explanation. Clark is the only one being made to compromise. And that doesn't read like coincidence. It reads like control. And what does that do to the fans who've been watching Clark's journey from the beginning? It creates tension. It creates mistrust. It makes people question whether the organizations running the show actually understand or care about what the athletes bring to the game. Because it's not just about stats. It's about connection, narrative, and stripping a player of that. This player, at this moment, is a slap in the face to everything she's achieved. This whole situation also highlights the bigger cultural gap between how female athletes are seen by fans and how they're treated by institutions. The public sees Clark as a star, a role model, a new kind of leader in women's sports. But the system still sees her as replaceable, adjustable, someone to be fit into their mold, instead of someone shaping the mold herself. And that tension, that's only going to grow, because more and more athletes are building their brands early. They're entering the spotlight already aware of their value, their image, their marketability. And if the systems around them don't adapt, don't start respecting that brand equity, they're going to keep losing trust, losing talent, losing fans. Caitlin Clark didn't refuse to play out of ego. She refused because the decision to take her number away felt like a direct attack on her legacy. And if you can't stand up for your legacy, what can you stand for? This isn't about her being difficult. It's about her drawing a line. And every athlete deserves that right. It's about the principle, about saying, I've worked too hard for this identity to be tossed aside like it doesn't matter. And if that statement makes certain people uncomfortable, maybe they need to ask themselves why. Because what Clark is really doing is putting a spotlight on the imbalance, on how women in sports are expected to be grateful for the opportunity, even when the treatment is disrespectful. She's not being dramatic. She's being honest. And fans get it. They're not confused. They're fired up. They see the jersey switch as symbolic of a larger issue. They're watching how this unfolds. And they're not going to forget. This could have been a celebration, a welcome moment, an easy way for Team USA to say, we respect your legacy. We want you here, as you. Instead, they created a moment of tension and disillusionment. They told the world, intentionally or not, that even the biggest stars don't get to call the shots when they step into the system. But the problem is, the fans are watching, and they're not buying the old excuses anymore. So if you're tired of watching female athletes get treated like they should just be happy to be included, if you're frustrated by the way Clark was sidelined over something that should have been a no-brainer, speak up. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let us know where you stand. Should Clark have been given number 22? Do you think this was about control? Should star athletes be able to protect their identity, even within Team USA? Like the video if you believe athletes should be respected for what they bring to the game, not reduced to a number that means nothing to them. And subscribe, because this is just the start. If this is how they're treating Clark at her peak, what does that say about how the system treats every other rising star? We're going to keep covering it. Keep holding the spotlight. Keep asking the uncomfortable questions because someone has to. And here's what makes it all sting a little more. Caitlin Clark earned number. This wasn't some number she picked randomly in high school and clung to out of superstition. It's a number that now means something, not just to her, but to everyone who's watched her career unfold. It's what she wore when she broke NCAA records, what she wore when she dragged Iowa into sold-out arenas, and what thousands of fans, kids, teens, grown adults, were on their backs because they want to be part of her story. So when USA Basketball looked at that history, looked at her impact, looked at the cultural weight she carries, and still handed her number 17, it said everything without saying a word. And the worst part? They didn't even try to justify it. No real explanation. No transparency. Just, here's your new number. Deal with it. That level of indifference hits different when it's aimed at the player who's currently elevating your sport to new heights. This isn't just poor optics, it's bad business. Because if USA Basketball had even the slightest understanding of what Clark represents, they would have realized this was an easy win. You don't get moments like this often, where an athlete is red-hot in the media, beloved by fans, backed by celebrities, and willing to put on your jersey. All they had to do was meet her halfway. Respect the brand. Respect the legacy. Instead, they pulled a power move, one that nobody asked for. And if this was supposed to put her in her place, it backfired spectacularly. Because all it did was ignite a public backlash and put even more focus on just how broken some of these systems still are. The thing is, we've seen this before. Time and time again, women athletes are asked to compromise in ways that their male counterparts never are. They're told to take the back seat, to prioritize the team image, to shrink their presence so the system doesn't feel uncomfortable with their success. But Clark? She's not built for that. Her entire existence in the public eye has been a defiance of those rules. She is the exception, and that's what makes this entire situation so revealing. Because it shows that even when a woman breaks all the rules of invisibility, when she becomes undeniable, they'll still find ways to minimize her. Still find ways to test how much she's willing to give up to stay in the game. And here's the real issue. This isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening during one of the most pivotal moments in women's basketball history. The WNBA is on the edge of change. Players are speaking up louder than ever about pay inequality, brutal schedules, lack of resources. They're not afraid anymore to call out the system that's failed them for decades. And now, Caitlin Clark, arguably the most valuable marketing asset the league and Team USA have, gets hit with this kind of organizational indifference? It's almost poetic if it weren't so maddening. Because what this says is, no matter how big you are, no matter how much you shift the culture, you're still playing by our rules. And let's be honest, those rules are outdated. They were built in a time when women's sports were treated like an afterthought, when branding didn't matter because no one was paying attention, when jersey numbers were handed out like cafeteria trays, and athletes had no platform to push back. But now, that world is gone. Players are brands. Athletes are media entities. And Caitlin Clark is a walking, shooting, record-breaking example of what happens when you actually let women athletes shine. She didn't just break viewership records. She redefined what women's basketball could be. And that's probably why this number change feels so personal. Because for so many fans, number 22 is Caitlin Clark. And to take that from her in such a cold, unceremonious way felt like an erasure. A reminder that legacy only counts when it's convenient for the organization. They want the results. They want the headlines. They want the fans. But the moment an athlete asserts control over her own image, suddenly it's sit down and be, that's not going to fly anymore. And if the people in charge were paying attention, they'd realize what a missed opportunity this is. Because Caitlin Clark wants to represent Team USA. She wants to grow the game. She's not out here throwing tantrums or demanding special treatment. She's asking for basic recognition, for the identity she's built, and for the number that helped build it. But instead of honoring that, the message she got was, your image doesn't belong to you. Not here. And fans? They're not staying silent. They're flooding comment sections, lighting up sports radio, dragging USA Basketball on every social platform. Because this wasn't just a decision. They felt the disrespect. And let's talk about that public support. When Lil Wayne goes out his way to praise a college basketball player, that's not casual. That's culture speaking. That's a legendary figure seeing something special and validating it in front of millions. That's someone who doesn't need to pander, but chose to highlight Clark's greatness anyway. And yet, she walks into the most prestigious basketball institution in the country and gets stripped of the very number that defines her. The disconnect is wild. On one hand, the culture is embracing her, celebrating her rise, investing emotionally in her story. On the other hand, the institution is saying, you're just another player. Here's 17. Wear it. No wonder people are upset. No wonder it feels like a slap in the This whole ordeal also raises the question of authority versus autonomy in sports. Who really gets to decide how athletes show up on the court? Is it the athlete who's built their name, their image, their brand from scratch? Or is it the organization that holds the jersey? This isn't just about Caitlin Clark anymore. This is about every player watching this go down. Because if she can't protect her legacy, what hope do they have? And it's not just current players. It's future generations. Kids who dream of playing professionally one day are watching this play out in real time and are learning something ugly. That even when you're the best, even when you're beloved, even when you've done everything right, you can still be disrespected by the people who are supposed to be in your corner. That's a dangerous message to send, especially now when women's sports are finally getting the spotlight they've deserved for decades. When players are proving that they can pull ratings, fill arenas, drive merchandise sales. The old excuses don't hold up anymore. You can't treat them like second-class athletes while cashing the checks they generate. And if this incident sparks anything, let it be this: a real conversation about respect, power, and who gets to define legacy in women's sports. Let it be a turning point where athletes say no more, where brands and fans start holding federations accountable, where we stop normalizing this kind of quiet erasure. Because Caitlin Clark is 22, and that number should be hers. Not just because it's what she wants, but because she's earned it 100 times over. And if that makes the system uncomfortable, good. Maybe it's time they got a little uncomfortable. Maybe it's time they started listening instead of dictating. And here's the truth they don't want to admit. This isn't going to quietly fade away. Because this isn't just a headline for the day or a hot take that disappears in 24 hours. This is a moment that marks something. The Caitlin Clark jersey number controversy isn't just another sports blip. It's a symbol, a warning, a line in the sand. When people look back at this era of women's basketball, they'll remember the rise of stars like Clark. They'll remember the record-breaking crowds, the media frenzy, the cultural shift. And right alongside that, they'll remember how the system responded. And right now, the system is flopping. They had a choice. Celebrate the momentum or suppress it. Respect the symbol or strip it. They chose wrong, and they chose wrong in front of everyone. Because make no mistake, the fans are watching. Not just the ones showing up courtside or buying jerseys, but the millions following online, reposting clips, defending their favorite players, and holding receipts. They're more informed than ever, more vocal, more unwilling to let things slide. And that means these decisions aren't happening behind closed doors anymore. They're playing out in real time, on full display. The number 22 has become more than a jersey. It's a stand-in for the conversation we're all having about how women athletes are treated when they become too powerful to ignore. And Caitlin Clark? She's that powerful. She's not just someone who plays the game well. She moves the game forward. Where her name is on the schedule, people show up. That kind of influence should be protected, nurtured, celebrated. Not micromanaged, not rebranded without consent. But what this incident really exposed is how uncomfortable organizations still are when women own their power. They're fine with women succeeding, so long as they don't get too confident, too visible, too in control. The second an athlete asserts themselves outside the box the institution built for them, the rules start, and here's where it gets real. Caitlin Clark didn't throw a tantrum. She didn't make a scene. She refused to play, yes, but not because she's a diva. She refused because this was about principle, about being told that everything she's built doesn't matter once she walks through a certain door. And honestly, if she hadn't refused, that would have sent the wrong message. Because what's the point of building a legacy if the people in power can rewrite it anytime they want? Clark standing her ground, even quietly, was a message, not just to USA Basketball, but to every woman watching, especially the young ones. That it's okay to demand respect. It's okay to push back when something feels off. And yes, it's okay to refuse to play when the terms are disrespectful. Let's be real. The men's side would never tolerate this. Can you even imagine Team USA giving LeBron James a random number and telling him, it's just a jersey? That would be sports media Armageddon. There'd be press conferences, leaked phone calls, angry tweets from every major analyst. But with Clark, the initial response from some corners was to downplay it, to treat it like she should just be happy to be there. That right there, that's the problem. Because this isn't about entitlement. It's about earned recognition. Caitlin Clark didn't stumble into relevance. She earned every bit of her spotlight. She reshaped college basketball. She helped bring new eyes to the WNBA before she even stepped foot in it. And she did all of that while carrying number 22. And yet, when it came time to represent her country, that identity got tossed like it didn't matter. And the ripple effect of that decision is bigger than they probably realize. Because this is the kind of thing that sticks, that lingers in the background of every conversation about how seriously the system takes its female stars. It raises the question, if you can't even let her keep her number, how are we supposed to believe you respect her voice, her image, her role in shaping the future of the game? Because if the Federation can't get that right, what else are they getting wrong behind the scenes? This moment has become a lightning rod for everything simmering in women's sports right now. Pay, treatment, visibility, respect. And it just crystallized how deep the disconnect still is between those on the court and those making the decisions. And let's be honest, it shouldn't have come to this. It could have been simple, thoughtful, a small gesture that would have meant everything. But instead, we got silence. We got a shrug. We got the kind of passive disrespect that makes players and fans alike start questioning what's really going on behind it. So let's not let this slide. If you're tired of the same old systems treating women athletes like they should be thankful just to be included, say something. Drop a comment. Was USA basketball out of line here? Should Clark have been given 22 without question? Feel like if you're standing with Caitlin on this. Share this video so more people know what's really going on. And subscribe, because if this is how they treat the biggest name in the game, you better believe we'll be covering what happens next.